I know, Dawn.
We're getting there.
Uh-huh.
Mute.
How you doing, Lennan?
I'm doing well. Thank you. I know we've been playing phone tag for the last couple of days.
You really don't want to speak to me. That's why you're calling me at these weird, odd hours. I get it.
I called you at noon. Is that a weird hour for you?
Yeah.
All right, we're live, everybody.
All right.
So I will just sort of kick us off really quickly and then pass the mic over to John. So for folks who are tuning in, welcome. This is the third of our sort of town hall panel discussions that we've hosted on Keyonce's channel for the previous two, and I'll remember to put a link to those previous discussions after this live processes. But we talked on the last one about sort of moving it from channel to channel a little bit to get visibility to different audiences, different folks, and also it is a community endeavor and it's a community conversation. So I was happy to volunteer to be next on the list, and you know, when we go again next quarter, can definitely be someone else, and I think in cross-pollinating it that way, I think it's a really good way to meet new folks, you know, engage different audiences, and spread the conversation, which is really the whole point of this. So John is our moderator. He joined us for the first time last time, and he's a great member of our community and also just a really good facilitator. So I'm going to pass the torch over to John, and we have the live chat going on YouTube and we've got the chat here, so we'll try to keep an eye on both those things. But take it away, John.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm Jonathan Ong. I'm an academic researcher. I study online spirituality, and a concept you might have heard recently is conspirituality. So the intersection of spirituality and conspiracy theory, which we can define as spiritual language being used to hunt, identify, and expose hidden enemies. So I've interviewed some of you as part of my research. And I'm also a huge tarot and astrology enthusiast. So I live in Northampton, Massachusetts, a very woo-woo town. And I definitely embrace that in terms of my teaching and also mentoring of students. So can you hear me all right? Yes, great. So the central question for the summit, in which we will continue today, and I'd love to hear from you, especially for those who have been here before, has been, how do you define and work through anti-racism in your spiritual practice? So this could be in your role as teachers. How mindful are you in terms of crafting your courses and syllabi in light of many cases of spiritual hijacking and distortion? How do you articulate this as well as writers, as publishers, artists, and decorators in terms of representation? And as influencers, how mindful are you in terms of what you post, what you amplify, how you curate your feed in terms of certain principles? And so those are the general questions for today, and we will go through each one of you. But I'm talking with Tom, I'm talking with Keyonce. We wanted to also open today's chat with a more focused discussion on what tarot can learn from our associated alternative spiritual traditions of astrology, psychic mediumship, etc. So at least from my research, my ongoing research, I'm talking with tarot and astrology folks, it seems that spiritual bypassing is a very common experience and vulnerability of the tarot community. And one question I wanted to provoke for today is that something kind of inherent to tarot as compared to other practices? So astrology has to be much more grounded and practical in terms of how it will relate and explain current events and crises, even international crises, in terms of like planetary movements, etc. Astrology also has to be much more directly political in light of elections, right? And I think leading up to the US elections last November, astrologers had to make predictions, or at least some of them felt compelled to do so. Some of them exposing their political affiliations in a transparent way, but sometimes in very sketchy ways as well. Should tarot learn from astrology in terms of political engagement, activism, or mutual aid? I noticed some astrologers using their language in terms of guiding activists, in terms of like timing as to when to go out to the streets, when to engage legislators. Should tarot be doing this more in terms of, like how we do weekly spread videos on YouTube? Another aspect of the question is about professionalization. So astrology has a longer history in terms of organization, um, also in terms of like certifications and academic conferences where you really get to deep dive in terms of comparing, contrasting different traditions. Should tarot be mindful and try to engage this kind of more professional environment? Or might that also be vulnerable in terms of extending power hierarchies, especially of race, but also gender and generation? So can we learn something from that? Another question, and I'll end after this question, is about the mainstreaming of alternative spirituality. So astrology has, of course, taken off in the past years. Snapchat now has a natal chart function to it. You've got new apps and a lot of Silicon Valley developers trying to develop new apps for Chani Nicholas, Jessica Lanyado, for example. Should tarot kind of be open to this kind of mainstreaming? How should we be concerned as well in terms of some of these practices? Is this something that we should embrace or be quite critical of? And then a final question is about embracing fun, embracing joy in our practice, and where might we also kind of center joy in terms of how we practice alternative spirituality. So I wanted to ask these questions first to astrology practitioners in our webinar, and then move on to our other tarot folks. And I'm looking at Millennial Soul Food, whom I enjoy his Instagram page and his many astrology memes.
Mm-hmm.
Did you want me to say something?
Yes, please. If you can kickstart the discussion, and as somebody who kind of straddles the different fields, maybe you want to say a little bit about how you apply astrology and tarot, and in terms of the politics of it as well.
Well, I guess so. I have always, I guess, been pretty aware of like historically marginalized identities whenever I've posted content. But I think there is a huge cultural wave this past summer, most notably after the murder of George Floyd. And so I kind of found like more people found me because I was already talking about like Black Lives Matters and, you know, anti-capitalism and stuff like that. So I do feel like I think my content kind of just happened to be there at the right moment. And then more people became interested in like these other, like, I guess, alternative movements and stuff.
You have 22,000 followers on Instagram, and I noticed that you have a lot of engagement in terms of like the funny memes as well. And how mindful are you in terms of like choosing which particular meme? Some of the languages of memes of like awakening, for example, could be easily hijacked by some far-right groups. Like, so how mindful are you about those?
I guess as far as my audience, I have a pretty niche audience. So I think they kind of understand a lot of the cultural nuances. Do you mean as far as like awakening, like spiritual awakenings and stuff like that?
And also the Great Awakening as a QAnon vocabulary.
Oh my God. Yeah, thankfully I haven't had any like controversy like that happen to me or anything, but yeah, for some reason it just hasn't happened. I also, like, this is kind of woo-woo, but I interact with the internet, like I have like certain spell work that I do to create protective barriers. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it. But yeah, I think I don't know. It's just, it kind of just happened. So yeah. And then the memes, I think I kind of have a darker sense of humor. So those kind of, I think people just like those. And yeah. Sorry if I'm not answering this like very well, but.
It's okay. I'd love to hear from Wanica, Miss Astrology, who also has a very exciting Instagram page.
Thank you. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I don't know specifically, but when I was listening to the questions, I didn't write them all down. But one of the questions that jumped out to me is when you said, you know, how it seems in politics and it seems like in predicting, we're way more comfortable using astrology. And should we incorporate more tarot into that? And instantly what jumped out to me was astrology is more Aquarius energy, which is more for the collective and more of the information that you know and sharing that, to where tarot comes off very much as Scorpio energy for me, which is very private, which is very alone into yourself. So it seems like intuitively my first reaction to that question was, no, tarot should not be publicized in that way. It feels very intimate to me. It feels very personal. And even in my readings, I need to know your name. I need to know your birthday. I need to know a specific question. We need to get more intimate when using the tarot cards. Astrology, on the other hand, has been around for so long. It's so well documented and studied that I do think that needs, and as far as I'm concerned, it's a science. So yeah, this science needs to be, everybody needs to have access to this information. And again, that's that Aquarius energy that astrology represents. I feel like tarot is very personal. And I even feel like in learning the tarot cards and learning to interpret them, that's a very personal thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Wanica. As somebody who practices both modalities, right? So each one has its own unique qualities and strengths that you can activate in terms of what the client needs. I can see Larissa posting something in the chat. Did you want to jump in, Larissa?
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I feel like in general, there's just a lot more pushback against predictive readings in tarot. Even when people say, or just indirectly, will do like a month ahead, there's usually a lot of disclaimer like, well, this isn't really predictive. And if it leans to that, there'll immediately be a lot more like free will versus prediction and stuff. Whereas astrology tends to almost inherently be predictive and it's kind of accepted. So I feel like the second you kind of cross over to that predictive in tarot, you get so much more pushback. That also might be why there's less of that.
I usually, I do on my Patreon, I do like collective readings, but it's more where people can choose a card. And I kind of like preface it with like, kind of if you're listening to this reading or watching this reading in this moment in time, the message is meant for you, but it's typically, it's not so predictive, but it's more like, you know, pick a card and I kind of make it intimate that way. But yeah, I definitely understand what everyone's talking about as far as the predictive readings being kind of problematic. Yeah.
Can I ask, why are predictive readings problematic?
Personally, I don't think they are. I mean, well, I should say, I think there's a lot of pushback, but I think that probably most of us who have had a practice have probably had a time where we're reading something and it predicts something that happens, and it does happen. But I think a lot of times that whole free will versus destiny. For me and my personal philosophy, what it boils down is that free will is not the same as omnipotence. We always have the ability to choose our actions. We don't always have the ability to foresee the consequences of those actions. So just because you may have like, I don't know, I had a dream one time about a fire at my job, and then there was a fire at my job a week after. It was just a small electrical fire, like nobody was hurt. They put it out, like we had to evacuate. But the thing is, there was nothing I could have done. Like I wasn't involved. I wasn't someone who was really affected other than being there. It was just something. So I can't say like, oh, how did this go with my free will, right? Like my free will is to go to work every day because I need to pay my rent. Like that's it. But I think a lot of times I think predictive stuff in general just makes people feel helpless, because if you see something and whether you want it to happen or don't want it to happen, if you feel like you're divorced from the result, then you get scared because you feel out of control. So I think that's where free will comes in. But for me, I don't see a conflict because I think we always have free will. We just don't always have the omnipotence to know the result or what will lead to this action or not lead to this action. So that's just my personal philosophy.
There was a big push in the 90s. I think you're right, Larissa. And I think it's an interesting thing that happened. The American Tarot Association kind of came to the fore in the late 90s. And I think they really set the tone for a lot of what became what we know as sort of mainstream tarot, and ethics, were a big thing for them. And they were very anti-predictive reading, very anti-fortune telling. And their whole thing was just sort of divorce tarot from what they perceived as like a historical association of tarot reading and fraud. And I think looking at it now through that lens, what a problematic thing to do in a way, because I think it's based on bias against anyone who does fortune telling, right? And who are the people who are most associated with fortune telling? Women, Romani people, midwives. And so inherent in this sort of ethical movement in the tarot in the 90s was at the base a kind of probably unintentional but very strong bias against fortune telling. And I think that that's really impacted the way that mainstream tarot today talks and thinks about tarot, that prediction is bad and wrong. But in astrology, it's there are many kinds of astrology, of course, but it's far less frowned upon. So it's an interesting thing that a lot of what we know today is sort of tarot, taboos, are actually really come from a movement to make it more ethical, and in so doing kind of erase perceptions that kind of problematic.
Can I jump in? I think about when you see predictive readings somewhere, how many disclaimers there are. I think it's not so much a problem. It's just that when the cards flip over and there may be any negative connotation on the cards at all, then you have to be like, okay, wait. It doesn't necessarily mean this applies to you directly. If it resonates, great. But if it's negative, then people don't tend to want to scare people off of the reading. And I think that when you put disclaimer over disclaimer over disclaimer, most people just would rather say that's problematic. Predictive readings are problematic. So they don't have to just layer all the disclaimers up. Now, I feel disclaimers can be used in a lot of places. And I think they need to be there. I think disclaimers need to be there to protect people. But then I think that when we think about predictive readings being problematic, it's not so much that there's a problem. It's just that there's so many people. It's like reading a horoscope out of a newspaper. It's so broad. It's so vague that when you say, oh, okay, the 3 of Swords means this, it literally is the meaning could be huge and it'd be so vast. And you have to condense it, and people feel like they have to condense that meaning to fit themselves. So I feel like there's something with the disclaimer there that makes people feel like there's a problem. And with astrology, I'm not an astrology anything, but I feel like with astrology, it is more the stars are there. There's no stopping the stars, there's no stopping it. It's going to keep going like this and there's nothing we can do about it. But with meanings, everyone is going to have a different meaning for each reading. And I think that's what Wanica was saying, is that it's so personal. The meanings, even like how you learn tarot and how you put card meanings together in a reading, it's all going to be personal. And then on top of, again, like I said, astrology, the stars are moving in a cycle. There's nothing you can really do about that. So I don't know. I don't even know if I answered the question.
You did. And I have one quick thing too that she just mentioned. I agree. I think the personal also has more to do with it. When you're talking about society, we obviously have a personal connection, but saying like something like riots is less divorced than you getting into an actual physical fight yourself. And when you're talking about a more personal thing, then people are going to take that more personally. The other thing that's interesting when you're talking about prediction in general is just like, at what point, like we talk about something in the future, but at what point does the present become the future? So for example, in my fire example, the fire happened that day, but the problem with the electrical panel had been there for God knows how long. So you're picking up on that. And that's almost like, you may not know the exact day or moment, but at the moment where that electrical system is doing whatever it's doing, I apologize, I'm not an electricity person, unless somebody intervenes and fixes it, then it's inevitable that it's going to cause a fire. So yes, in a sense, it was a prediction, but also it's inevitable. And the same, you can look at a lot of situations where it may be an argument, it may be falling in love. It's just that a lot of times, if you look back, the patterns leading up to the actual event are there before it actually occurs. So when you're talking about this, it's like, well, it's the future, but it's also the present, because the patterns that are going to lead to that are here now. So how much are we really predicting? So that's what I wanted to add.
Mhm.
There's a couple comments in the YouTube chat that I just thought were interesting to bring to the group here. One of them says that ethics are often very Eurocentric. And then immediately after that, it says, greetings. From an African standpoint, we accept prediction and understand it as a voice of spirit reaching out to you, negative or positive. And so, I think the bias against prediction is also a very cultural thing.
That's what I wanted to get to, that aspect, right? So, Morgan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that just in my perspective, I feel like there's this maybe dichotomy that's being created between astrology and tarot. I do think astrologers can bring their biases in to their practice. There's a well-known occultist that I've followed for a long time, who made predictions around or forecasts around, the election and politics. And it was clear that he was biased against Biden and was very defensive of Trump's presidency. And that carried over into his astrological predictions as well. I think we all have to make sure that we are bringing our own common sense and judgment and our own understanding of where we are politically, what our analysis is, what our background is. Do we feel that, I think part of it comes down to, does someone speak for us? Do we trust that person to speak for us and to represent our perspectives? No matter what their practice is, there are certain tarot readers who I trust more. And the same thing with astrologers, because of their background, because of their level of study, their experience level, and also their personal perspectives. Those do matter to me. So I don't really see, in terms of the predictive aspect, I do think that, it's incumbent upon people in the community to provide that kind of consumer education and make sure people understand how do you engage ethically and critically with this information that you are consuming.
Yeah, thanks so much, Morgan. I think the principle you speak of is about transparency, right? And I did notice that in terms of the US elections, how astrologers who predicted a Trump victory in a way doubled down on that and pushed the narrative of a stolen election. So it doesn't always also mean that to be political is to be transparent and to be honest, right? And so there's a lot of dangers around that as well. I wanted to pivot a little bit and talk to Kim here, who I noticed a few tarot channels on YouTube and Instagram hosting readings also for the Asian community in light of recent attacks that have Of course, been much more covered in mainstream media. I think we've been fighting about invisibility of Asian hate crimes. And I wonder whether you've noticed that, whether some people have also come to you around these themes.
My turn to go, right? Okay. Hi, first of all, I just wanted to say, like, I'm really happy to be here. I'm really honored to be here. I'm a little nervous, but mostly excited. So thank you for that question. So just to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, you're asking me like my reactions to the Stop Asian Hate and the whole, and everything that's been happening, right?
That's right. And also whether any clients might have come to you, whether you felt like you had to do something for the community and not just for individual people as well.
Okay. Yeah, I think right when it happened, to be honest, I was overwhelmed at first. And I definitely felt the pressure to say something and do something just because I'm a member of the Asian community. And I also struggle with the guilt of not being able to immediately come up with something. But I think I also just needed the time to process for myself. Because in the very beginning, I was just overwhelmed. And then as more news trickled in, and I also saw a lot of the other accounts and influencers that I follow who are also Asian, and they actually also experienced Asian hate. And that's when it started to really dawn on me that this really affects me on a personal level. I mean, I'm in Canada, so it's a little quieter compared to what's happening in the States, but it's still, the tension here is really bad. I think when I did the research, I think the hate crime against Asians here in BC rose by 700%, which is insane since COVID started. So yeah, like definitely I felt the need to say something, but I also felt really numb, because it's a little traumatizing just to think that I could go out in the streets and I could be just targeted because of my skin color. And that's very unnerving to me. And yeah, like a lot of people from my, who follow me on Instagram, they actually a couple of them personally reached out to me and asked me like, am I doing okay? Mostly from a concern perspective. And for me as a, yeah, I mean, like, I just struggle with the guilt sometimes. I'm not being able to come up with something to say right away. It's something I think about all the time when stuff like this happens. I'm just like, I should say something, but there are times when I'm just like, I don't know what to say yet. I just am processing that myself. And sometimes it's just so overwhelming to just go through with it and even just be a bystander, but also not really. But yeah, usually what I do, because I'm mostly an artist, even though I struggle with the guilt of not perhaps coming up with like an immediate call to action for some people or an infographic telling people how to do it in certain instances. I've been seeing a lot of those useful things online. But how I mainly process these things is I kind of just turn to art. I either just try to process my emotions by expressing them, or I try to create something useful for the community when it comes to situations like this. So I hope that answered your questions. It's like a little rambly, but.
Well,
so
thank you.
I just wanted
go for it, Panda.
So I just wanted to say, like, around what Kim said there, like, I understand that guilt, that feeling, but also I think it's important for people to remember that as people of color, like, we're processing a lot. We're dealing with a lot. So especially in times of crisis, it's not fair to go to the first person of color that you know and ask them, what should you do? Because you're like giving us more work and more pressure. And like, we're just trying to get through the day. Sometimes we're mourning, like we're grieving. And so like, it's okay to like, look up your own stuff, look up your own, like find your own call to action. And like, it's hard to like watch these things, watch these horrible crimes and murders and feel afraid, and then also be like, I have to create content around this. I have to get together hotlines and fundraisers, and I have to put a graphic together. Like, no, I have to just like make sure that I've eaten something and checked on my loved ones and like slept. And so like when people rush to your accounts and do that, like just make sure you're uplifting people in a good way and like supporting them, not giving them more work to tell you what to do, like, if that makes sense.
And I piggyback off of what you just said, Arcane Panda. I want to thank you and thank you for this invitation here. But I'm so appreciative of what you just said, because even the question of, what's our position, anti-racist position of that nature. And I get it. There's a lot happening and some of us feel really compelled to speak. But like Arcane Panda was saying, that I think because sometimes we live this every day. We go through this more than just on television. And so sometimes for people to come to us as that resource, especially also knowing that you read tarot or you do astrology. I'm also a mental health counselor by day. So I do therapy all day and then I'm doing this, right? And it's no problem if people are really genuinely wanting some insight, but I appreciate when people feel like, you know what, if I can look up how much something costs on Google, I can also maybe explore some different perspectives for myself, or maybe educate myself on things that maybe I just didn't know or didn't expose myself to. And I also believe that exposure opens up our own intuitive lens or our own educational lens and gives us more background with regard to our readings, with regard to our predictability. I don't do predictive readings. I'm not opposed to them. I've had them before in my life, but someone mentioned in the YouTube, in the Zoom chat about it being problematic. And I think part of that for me has been, making sure we're clear. It's not that it's a problem, but when you have an established relationship with someone, like a good reader, or if you are in a tradition where you have a mentor or a guide that has been teaching you, mentoring you in the art. And so there's a trust that's built, there's a genuineness that's established there, that predictability is kind of going back to what Larissa said, it becomes like common practice. Like there's something that's already there that you're tuning in and tapping into. And that's how I see that. And I think our lens of life, our lens of the world, and how we view and how our intuitive senses are stay fresh, is what are we exposing ourselves to? How are we grounding ourselves before each reading, each day? How are we taking care of ourselves? Someone mentioned self-care, and that being a radical act of self-importance. So I just wanted to add that, and I appreciate what everyone said thus far.
And can I add one quick thing too? So I feel like it's important to notice that when we talk about readings for a particular community or a community issue, the same issue can affect different people in that community in very different ways. So for example, with the George Floyd thing, I was obviously horrified. I think everybody was horrified. But for instance, even me and my brother. Now, I don't feel a lot of times that same sense of danger that my brother feels because he is a large Black man, that same sense of danger. And then I don't feel necessarily, I'm in a place right now that doesn't have the same amount of racism that I experienced when I lived in Georgia. And I say that because even within the sense of say, Black violence or Asian violence, there's going to be places where it's more dangerous and it's a different kind of feeling versus horror. And so when you're trying to just put all of that together and make a reading for a community, it becomes problematic too, because you can't really generalize. It seems like you should be able to, but you can't, because even within the same community, even within the same issue in the same country, there's going to be different levels of danger, different levels of trauma at different parts, depending on that particular thing. The other thing that it's important to notice is that because a lot of tarot readers are American, and because also with the effect that America has on global politics, when we're talking about speaking and being an activist, it's important to notice that there's not going to be as much global equality as we would like. Most of the stuff that people are talking about is stuff that affects America or places close to here. You don't necessarily see a lot of human rights violations and things that are happening in other places. And so that's also something that we have to consider when we're talking about encouraging and giving voice. By definition, if we're talking about certain issues, there's not that equality that people might say, well, what about Burma? What about Syria? Like, I don't feel comfortable speaking on issues in Syria. I don't know enough about it to do a reading. But at the same time, if everybody's doing readings on African Americans and the Asians, then again, you're getting this thing where unconsciously the bias is towards certain stories, certain issues, and there's not going to be that equality. So that's just something that we have to consider when we're talking about community presence and community feelings and reading.
Yeah, thanks so much, Larissa. Such a mindful contribution about how specific experiences could be, and we need to think about it intersectionally. I'm looking at Arcane Panda. I know Arcane Panda lives in South Dakota, and she's talked about the particular challenges of living there, right? A very conservative place. And so I wonder to what extent you navigate both your online and offline worlds. Do you see more of a community online then and try to connect there? How do you compare the kinds of clients and people that you connect with online versus people in your community in South Dakota?
So things here are just really tense. We're a really rural state, and we're a red state. And so I do find more community online. Like, being here with you guys is so nourishing, and I appreciate all of you. But yeah, so just building online spaces, and with that, and everyone here has done a great job, especially since we started having these meetings and stuff, but creating inclusive, diverse, anti-racist spaces. But I think it's so important just to let people know that, like, it starts with you, like with yourself, and creating the space around you. Like, letting people know that, like, this space is an anti-racist space. This is an inclusive space. And that's from what you're online, and then for what kind of clients you're accepting, and, holding your friends and family accountable, because like that will grow, and it kind of like plants seeds. I don't know, it's slow. Like, I don't ever feel like I have any answers, but and I have like posted things, like, it's anytime that you highlight the fact that you're a person of color, it's like people get upset and then you lose followers. But you have to decide what's really important to you, and really watch the spiritual people that you follow, no matter the size of their platform. Like, are they talking about these things? Are they, posting about them? Or have they been silent the entire time? Because that silence creates safe spaces for hate. And like, it will never, push through if we don't do these things, even if they're uncomfortable, or even if you lose followers. I lost a reading. I went out to Hippie Haven, and they are the South Dakota's only zero waste store, and they're a big supporter of BLM and land back and LGBTQIA. And they just went viral on TikTok, and like, everyone came, like, our entire state was like leaving them, like, we're gonna burn your store down, like, we're gonna kill you, like, all this different stuff. And the internet came back and like bought them out overline. Like, everything in their store was bought out, but it was from people that weren't from here that supported them, and that kind of stuff. But I go there to do readings because it is a safe environment. But I lost a client that had came in from the, like, a Trump rally, and she came in off the street, and I don't know. It's so, but I mean, I lost out on that. That was money that like would help feed my kids, but it's necessary. And if we want justice, if we want, justice for George Floyd, we have to continue to do these things. I mean, we're holding a trial for someone that we saw commit murder before the world, and George Floyd is dead, and he's the one that they're running into the ground. I mean, he's more on trial than, his murderer. And so I just think that it's really important to like create this powerful space around you, with your family members, with your friends. I mean, we have to hold people and ourselves accountable. So I think I don't even know what the question was, but I appreciate you guys.
Wanica, you had something to say?
Yeah. Yes, Queen. Thank you. I really wanted to say that, and maybe I'm just speaking a little bit more for myself but I'm an astrologer and a tarot reader. I'm also a Sagittarius. So there's this part of me that acknowledges all 12 signs in the chart, and then feels like that it's very important for us to do what we feel led to do, and what we feel led to speak out about, and what we feel passionate about. And so there are times that things happen that my spirit does not feel led to make a meme or to speak out and make a post or to even address the issue at all. And so I just won't, because that's what's true to me. And I think that goes also back to tarot being very personal and being predictive with that. Like, I feel like you have to ask specific questions of the tarot cards. You need to understand what the essence of what you're really wanting to know is. And so it's really that same. So I think all tarot readers should start within themselves, just to get that understanding themselves and to really tap in to what's important to them. And that us as readers, we just got to speak out for what is actually important to us. I don't like the idea that we're expected to speak out on everything. We're expected to predict everything. If I'm not drawn to something, I'm just not going to speak out on it. And the same thing, if someone is drawn to me for what I do and don't speak out, then that's my niche. Those are my crumbs from the master's table. And that's plenty for me. We don't have to be about everything. Mars is in Gemini right now, so we might all try to be speaking out about everything and have something to say about everything. But sometimes that's, you don't get enough of substance with somebody. And so I really just feel like it's important for us to be true to ourselves as readers and be true to what we speak out on and post content about what we're really passionate about. Very Aries energy, right?
Gitta?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so
Hi,
much
Gitta.
thank you so much for inviting me to this panel. I feel seen. I feel like I've been invited to have a seat at the table. It's really amazing. Thank you. Because a lot of you guys I watch, but I don't know if anybody's watching me. I have a pretty small channel. My channel, I mostly just explore my own spiritual path and what I'm doing with tarot. I'm not like offering any spiritual services to the public. Like, I'm not like reading professionally for people or anything. But it's just I share my personal journey. So I have a few things to say. First, like kind of responding to what Kim said, Panda said, and Wanica said, and that is just like that whole feeling of like overwhelm and trauma that comes with these things. Like race has been a discussion, has been something that I've like sort of talked about my whole life and been like an advocate for my whole life. I feel like I've always been in different spaces where I'm like, yeah, racism is a real thing. Racism is a real thing. And people are like, really? Then finally, like the George Floyd situation happens and it's just like front and center in such a real way. I was in the hospital at the time because I was like about to give birth to my twins. So it was like, I was dealing with that, like complete anxiety attack over about to have a C-section. So I could hardly even process, that whole George Floyd situation. I still haven't watched the video because to me, it was like too much in a sense that like, this is what we have been talking about, people of color, for years, decades, and all of a sudden it's there for everybody to see and people are like acknowledging it. And it was like at that first, I don't know, I just felt like I had to take a step back and just process it all. And I was like, look, I'm fucking done talking about this. You guys see it for yourself now? Yeah, deal with it, That was sort of my, I feel like my emotional response to white people, pretty much. And then I felt a way, I felt bad, I felt guilty because there was just so much, there was so much going on social media in terms of people like, okay, I'm gonna talk about this and I'm an ally and I'm gonna post this and I'm gonna do that to show that like I care. And it was, it was happening among non-people of color, non-Black people, whatever you want to call it, but it was also happening among Black people. And I'm from Bermuda, so I'm not in the States. We're outside the States, but we do share a lot of like cultural, you know, we share a lot of cultural ties with you guys in the States. They say, you know, what happens in the US, they say in America, America sneezes, Bermuda catches a cold. So, you know, we are affected in a lot of ways, but it's different here because people of color are in the majority here, you know, as opposed to in the US. But anyways, what I'm saying is there was a lot of demonstration I saw happening from Americans that I follow, but also Bermudians that I follow. And I got a little annoyed sometimes because it's easy for us outside of the US to look at the US and see what's going on and feel a way about it, but then be kind of silent or not fully acknowledging like the racism that happens in your own country. So this, you know, I saw this also among white people here, because like a whole bunch of people are like putting up in their shops, like, we stand with Black Lives Matter, and everybody's doing like this PR stuff. And I'm like, seriously? You guys you want to talk about Black Lives Matter now, but when we have an election, you know, you're the first people to say that the all Black party that is about to be voted into power is a Black supremacist party. So, you know, you have issues with Black leaders and Black people in your own country, but you want to sort of champion this cause. Anyway, I think I'm getting off topic a little bit. I'm getting a little excited. But, you know, what I wanted to say really is that my channel for me, it was a way, tarot for me has been a way to deal with actually some shadows I've had around my European background and whiteness in general, you know. So it's been interesting for me, and I've come to my channel and it's been a way for me to just kind of like, in a way, check out from like a lot of what I deal with on a daily basis, because Bermuda, there's a lot of racial tension here. And my mom is like very much a social activist. So like, we're always having these debates. And like, in a way, like tarot and my channel has been a bit of spiritual escapism for myself. But in response to what, sorry, I'm going on and on, but in response to what Wanica said about, you know, you do what you feel moved to do. So it took me a long time to process the George Floyd thing. And I didn't post anything about it. I didn't post a video till like 6 months later. And I have to say, I get annoyed sometimes, or not annoyed, but I just notice that me as a person of color, my channel is very small. Sometimes I wonder if people watch me, if they're just watching me because I'm a person of color. And when I post videos that are specifically like in reference to race or racial issues, I find that they tend to get the most views, the most likes, and things like that. And in a sense, it's like, if I feed into this stereotype of like, I'm a Black person and therefore I'm an ambassador, I'm a spokesperson for these issues, then it's like, that's what people want to see. And that's kind of annoying. Like it's a little bit annoying, you know? So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for bringing in a much needed international perspective, and trying to acknowledge also racial hierarchies within complex national societies, which are very specific, right? I think that's really important. And just to engage your feelings of guilt as well, right? And I think going back to what Wanica and also Kim had said earlier, yeah, there's so much guilt. For me, in terms of Stop Asian Hate, the Asian community is fighting against hate at the same time that we're fighting against invisibility. And we kind of like felt this sense that here's our one shot to communicate that issue. Here's what we need to do now. Even though like we're so exhausted and really tired and just want to detach, right? I wanted to move on a little bit and pivot our discussion towards professional organizations and what we can learn from our from our leaders, from our mentors. I'm looking at Mark Horn, in your experience, a longer experience in the community. And I wonder whether you can shed a bit of light in terms of, is there opportunity to have like real professional organization when it comes to like ethical practice or discussion, or might that add more complications and in terms of like power and silencing?
I'm not really certain quite how to answer that, because I've pretty much steered clear of professional organizations. You know, because my own opinion is that what I've seen over time is that some of the people who found these organizations are trying to take power of the community. And or establish a role in the community rather than have it be sort of a broad-based organization. So as I say, I've tended to shy away from those things. You know, I feel like one of the things that I love about the tarot community is that it doesn't feel, at least, it doesn't feel hierarchical to me. You know, it's about who is sharing wisdom, who can I learn from, and where can I get that learning? And other than that, you know, I mean, I've been to a few tarot conferences, and you know, as is also the case here, you know, I am the minority because I'm a man, and tarot is an overwhelmingly women's field. Necessarily for any given reason other than, you know, perhaps it's an intuitive thing, or men may have their own categories around these things, you know, but you know, at those conferences, I've felt everybody welcome. You know, certainly as a queer man, certainly as a Jewish man who reads tarot from a Jewish lens, and which is, and you know, tarot is thought of as in no way that. You know, I don't feel I have. Right now I'm in the middle of my annual 49-day practice, counting the Omer, and this is an intensely, because people are talking reflective, predictive. This is an intensely reflective practice. And when I was writing the book about it, I wrote about how I used this practice to investigate my own unconscious bias and racism. And I shared some of that in the book because I felt that it was important to make it clear that tarot is a tool of awakening on many levels. And it's important to question ourselves in all of those ways. And I actually, when the book was coming out, I was sort of gritting my teeth and white knuckling my what do you call it, armrests, expecting to be attacked by vast numbers of people. And oddly enough, you know, I guess the people who wanted to attack me just never bothered. They're not my audience. They don't come or listen to me, or, you know, tune in on Instagram or wherever I am. And you know, I've only received support. So I'm not certain that answers the question. I did want to say something to a question you said earlier about spiritual bypassing. I've seen spiritual bypassing in my synagogue community, in my Buddhist meditation community. You know, I think that this is endemic to any spiritual pursuit. You know, people, you know, try and use spirituality as a way of dealing with the nitty-gritty here and now. And I think part of my practice is always about doing my best to keep people grounded. One other thing I wanted to say is that earlier this morning, I did a reading for a Libyan asylum seeker. You know, sometimes, you know, I get people who are, you know, who want a reading from a vastly different culture. than mine, and who has a completely different experience that I'm not certain that I know how to speak to. And of course, I'm using the Waite-Smith deck, which is highly Eurocentric. But I've always done my best to find what is the wisdom in there that transcends those images, rather than sort of getting involved in any of the cultural mess around that. That's enough. I've taken enough time.
I'd like to address that. So the cultural aspect of doing a reading for someone else who is outside of your culture. What happens if you're doing a phone reading?
Actually, this was a phone reading.
So why should it make a difference? This person is a human being who came to you for insight.
Yes, that is true. It was, as I said, because my interpretations are based on the Kabbalistic study that I've done.
Mm-hmm.
And, sometimes when I discuss that, when I bring it up, there are people who don't want to hear any of that, or it can bring down a curtain for some people because of where the information or my learning has come from. So it can create a barrier. So I always do my best to try and determine how much of my background can I share as a way of relating to my client. And if I feel that there's any way that my background would get in the way of the relationship or their ability to hear what I have to share with them, I keep that in the background.
I find that interesting. So for me, especially, the reason why I say this is because my religion, my faith, has nothing whatsoever to do with tarot. Nothing. My beliefs, my life, my culture has not one iota to do with tarot. And yet I have been reading tarot for a plethora of clients for 30 years. I've never, ever one time, the reason why I ask is because I'm thinking myself, have I ever had to compartmentalize who I am before I did a reading for someone? No, right? The person who comes to me, they have searched me out and I'm there to provide a service. My cultural background and upbringing, I mean, if the reading goes to another level where they have other questions, then I can step in. But at the time, I'm only providing a service. So I guess maybe that's why I keep I'm trying to wrap my head around the idea of wanting to make sure that you are on the same path or alignment or the same vibe with your client, but your client's just come to you for a reading. And, I want to believe that 99.99% of the people who come to us for readings, they've already sussed us out, right? And there's so many more parts to yourself that maybe if that client knew about you, maybe they wouldn't come to you. And it has nothing to do with your ability to read cards. Maybe if they saw how you ate a hamburger, that would turn them off. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trivializing it, but I just think that sometimes we make things so much bigger than they need to be that we tend to lose the focus of what we're supposed to be doing for the most part as human beings. And that to me seems to be like the great disconnect. We have a list of things that we need to tick off before we can say, do anything. And that's one of the things I wanted to say, like to Gitta and, to Kim, don't ever apologize for what you cannot do. Meaning don't ever apologize for feeling like, oh, I haven't done enough, or I should be doing more, right? The fact that you are present and you become aware, that's where it starts, is awareness within yourself. Gitta, you're giving birth. You know, May 25th. How many people are going to remember that day? May 25th, 2020. Huh? How many people are going to remember that date? No, not too many. You remember an event that could have taken place on the 4th of July, 1988. And I can tell you, if you go back and you look, this is not the first time, like you said. So now it's something to the forefront. Now it's something that we're looking at in our face. So we have these tools that we're supposed to work with to help better ourselves, empower others. And yet we want to have all these caveats before we feel like we can step in to do anything. And that's why, you know, people come for readings because they want a heads up. They want a little bit of their self-empowerment back, you know? And I'm telling you, I always feel like when a person comes for a tarot reading, you are the last stop on that train ride. I feel like they have exhausted everything else. And they are coming to you for just help me understand a little bit more of this human existence that I am participating in. That's all. You know, they're not even asking you for like affirmative answers. We don't know. I really like to believe that we don't give our clients enough credit. You know what I mean? I feel that a tarot reading is like listening to the traffic report or the weather report in the morning, right? And I just think that we as readers, we're the ones that like Lennan said, you know, the disclaimers and the caveats, we make it so much more than it needs to be. And, you know, Mark, when you say there's no hierarchy, I'm going to have to disagree with you. There is a hierarchy in tarot. There is. There are some people, you know, you can't get in edgewise and they won't even bat an eye at you, and all they're concerned about are the numbers, right? And the way that I really know this, okay, because we're talking about like specifically astrology and tarot. Sheilaa Hite, okay? Sheilaa Hite. How many people have heard of Sheilaa Hite? Okay, so we have a panel of what, 19, 20 people. That's unfortunate because Sheilaa Hite is a prolific tarot writer. Her books, all of them, here. Huh? Right. You see what I'm saying? This is a woman who's been writing books for decades. And when you go to bookstores, you can't find her books. I guess maybe the question is where I want to get around to is like, why? There is a hierarchy. Why are some people acknowledged and some not? Why are some things paid attention to and some not? Stop Asian hate. Why not just stop hate, period, across the board, right? Why can't we narrow the focus down to hate across the board? And then my other question is, so what, cancel the patriarchy, get rid of the patriarchy? Really look at who is funding and keeping the patriarchy going. If you really stop and you saw, you actually tapped into something there, Mark, when you said it. This field is run by or owned by predominantly who? Yeah, right? So who do you think is keeping the machine of patriarchy going? I will always say this, your money is your power.
Wait, how do you time myself?
I will always say that. Your money is your power. You want to stop hate, Asian hate, Black Lives Matter, all of these things that matter human existence. Think of where you're spending your money. That is your power, right? So when people come to us for readings, I mean, this is my personal philosophy. I don't want you to be attached to me when I do a reading for you. I want to empower you so that you can get out there and kick some ass for another 24 hours, that you can stake your claim on this planet. That's what I do. And if it involves a predictive reading, then yeah, because you see, coming from the spiritual path that I belong to, you are part of you're part of your destiny. You know what I mean? You're it. You are what makes it happen. Right? You can get a predictive reading, but if you sit in your home on your couch, what do you think is going to happen? If you, quote unquote, you will say that reading didn't come to pass. But if you took action, right, that whole Four of Wands energy, then you participate in having that reading come to pass. And that is what I think that people don't seem to understand about predictive readings. You know what I mean? I think that they feel like the person has given up their free will when they sit down in front of a stranger and says, oh, you know, at 3 p.m., you're going to meet raven-headed beauty, you know, who's on roller skates. You know what I mean? I think that they've trivialized predictive readings in that sense. And maybe the term predictive readings may even be incorrect. But again, you know, I don't want to ramble. I've been silent, but it's like there is a hierarchy in this, and we have to recognize that, right? Why are some tarot books on your bookshelves and some not? Why? Because the people who are spending the money don't want these on their shelves. That's what it is. You know, let's be honest. The first chakra book I ever picked up was this one, 1998. You can't find this. Go to any metaphysical store and look in the chakra section. You don't see this on there. So that's what I'm saying with this whole thing. Like, when are we going to say, okay, enough is enough, and really look at things as they truly are? You know, what Gitta talked about, oh, I matter now. That's what I said in my last video. I don't want to be a freaking acronym. Don't tell me that I matter now. I know who and what I am. I don't need to preface anything by saying I'm a Black woman. I'm a person of color. I'm trendy now. A year from now, I'll be nothing to most people. All of those acronyms and those titles and those names mean nothing until you see me as a valuable human being, worthy of the same treatment as any other human being that you hold in high regard. So allow the tarot books to come into your bookstore. Ask for them, request them. That's why I would say your money is your power. If you don't feel like you can't do anything, think about where you're spending your money. Think about who you're supporting. I'm done, John. I'm sorry.
So,
I'm not sorry.
I have a couple. Can I just add like two things? Well, I guess
Sure.
three. So the first, while I partially agree with you about the culture issue, I have to say, and disclaimer, this is coming from somebody, I work in the health culture field, the health field, and we have to take like classes on cultural and cross-cultural communication. And I will say that while we absolutely are 100% humans living a human experience, and that should be taken into consideration, culture does play a huge part in communication. And there have been many times in the health culture field, particularly in California and New York, are there specific instances that I'm thinking about where, because of a communication about how different people and different cultures view things like health, view things like time, how likely they are to question an authority figure. So for example, one example was a place that had a high Japanese population and the doctors were white. Well, this particular community was not likely to question doctors because they viewed them as authority figures and it would be disrespectful. And so if the doctor said something that was wrong or that they didn't understand, even if they asked them, do you understand? They would agree, because even if it's like, well, no, I don't actually drink, and you're saying that this might be an alcohol problem, they're taught not to question a figure in authority. And so it led to bad care. And that's one example. That's what's more of authority, but there's other in how people view illnesses, how certain cultural systems might associate illness with unethical behavior or as a punishment, and how those kind of things can lead to how they perceive certain diagnoses. And I mention this just because tarot is obviously a spiritual health thing. So I would say, yes, culture does impact it. If you're talking about people who think that every physical or emotional illness comes from an underlying spiritual one versus a person that thinks that there is no connection to the spirit, those two people are going to have a very different response to when you say things like depression or cancer. You know, like somebody might think, well, you're saying that I'm weak of spirit because I've been inflicted by this, if they think it's a spiritual punishment, versus another person might be totally okay. So I do think it is important to notice that in different, both cultural and spiritual communities, that not all the time, but there are definitely times where things that we might consider a straightforward sentence, even in like tarot, might have a very different connotation depending on the spiritual and philosophy of the person that's hearing them. So yes, it can 100% affect reading. Not all the time, but it can. The second thing is stop hate versus stop Asian hate. I like that idea, but I think that there have been a lot of studies that show that when you get so general like that, it becomes easy for people to agree. Like everybody's going to agree. Should we stop hate? Yes, absolutely. I mean, you have your extremists who we all know, but the average person's going to agree. Yeah, I agree. Stop hate. But you're talking about arrowing down on specific things. So it's like when you're saying Black Lives Matter, obviously all lives are equal. We're talking about this because this is an issue and people are blind. So when you're talking about Asian hate, like I know with Asians, there are that whole model minority, right? So a lot of other people who are Hispanic and Black, and I've even heard this with my friends, like, well, you know, Asians are like white people, like they're always smart, they always have good jobs, they don't have any problem. Like I'm sure you guys have all heard this. So when you're talking about stop Asian hate, it's not just about saying that we don't need to stop all hate. It's about acknowledging the people that know Asians are not just model minorities. They have issues, they have hate, and it's about arrowing down to a specific thing that people might be ignorant of. And then the third thing that I would say is I do agree with you on hierarchy, but I think that we have to, or at least in my opinion, I think that you have to separate hierarchy versus influence versus authority. So there are 100%, and what I think you're talking about is influential hierarchy. There are voices that have more power, they have more reach, they have more influence, and these were the first people that publishers approach for books, or that people are going to buy their decks first, or, you know, so there's influential hierarchy 100%. But I think the other thing that is not in our community is the authoritative or the authority hierarchy, which is, I think, also what we were talking about. Like for me, I have to have a license. Like there's authorities above me that have a license for me to do my job. Doesn't matter if I agree with them or not, like I have to have it or I can't practice. Our community is not like that. Even if somebody who has a lot more influential hierarchy than me says, you have to practice in this way, I could just say no, and they have no authority over me. So that is a certain amount of power that we have that other communities may not have. We may not all have equal influence, but we do have equal authority, and that gives us more leeway to work than in situations where there is both an influential and an authoritative hierarchy. So that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Larissa. Super thoughtful responses. I saw Wanica wanting to express something, and after Wanica, maybe I can turn to David, who I know has a lot to share about like cultural specificity when it comes to tarot reading.
Thank you. I just kind of got the idea when Mark was talking, and I know he had to get off. It felt like maybe just with him, and I mean this in the gentlest way possible, but maybe just as his culture and as his background as a white man, and as white people tending to like things in a certain kind of way and in a certain kind of tradition and within these boundaries, and this is what Pluto is currently destroying. But it makes me think, is he putting his ideas of how this reading should go and how it should look like onto his clients? And that's more of something that's just innately inbred into him, to where some of us that have culture. So myself, raised in a Black culture, I have a Black father, a Puerto Rican mother, but a very free culture, very like movement. Everybody's different, even within our own family. So when my client comes, the one thing I always tell myself is they paid me for the truth. They came to me, they paid me for my insight, for my perspective. And I never care where my clients come from, and they come from all over,
right?
So many different backgrounds. They found me. And so it feels like, are we taking our own biases, our own upbringings into this spiritual craft with these cards? This is such an intimate thing that we're doing. Why are we bringing these traditions and these boundaries and these limits into a reading that has no limits? It's so insightful and it's so deep. Like, we're just robbing our clients just based on how we think things should go. All I do is light the incense, say a prayer, make sure my elements are there, believe that my client wants the hardcore truth from me, and then I just deliver. And I have excellent reviews. And I think also with the predicting as well, because I tap into me and I'm true to myself, and I ask God to tell me what to say. I don't care their background, their culture, any of that. And so many times when I'm predicting, I'm taking words out of people's minds, out of their mouths. I had a client just yesterday. I said, this feels like you need to schedule a photo shoot for this and celebrate this. And she just starts crying. And she said, my feelings were so hurt by what happened that I canceled the photo shoot. Now, if I would have been, I'm not one to really take a lot of photo shoots and not really into that, or to brag a whole lot about stuff. And if I would have took my feelings about that into that reading, it wouldn't have gave her the encouragement she needed in that moment. And she came to me for a solid encouragement, regardless of what I think, based on how I was brought up. So I think when we go into these readings, we definitely got to have a clear mind, definitely get rid of limiting beliefs and traditions so that we can give them what their soul is really seeking. And the soul doesn't have those same boundaries and limits and structures and organizations like that. So that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Listening to that, I came from a religious background, and one of the things that drew me to tarot was it was really open. I was able to really, explore different, different things about myself, about society in general. And I just found that to be very refreshing. And I think that when we bring a lot of tradition into it and a lot of dogma, it kind of clouds it for me. And I don't know, it kind of disappoints me a little bit when, I hear like certain rules and certain things that have to be set in place. And, I just find that it's very free. It's very open to use how you like it. And I don't know. I mean, I just felt like it was, like I said, refreshing. It was a new way of looking at things. And it really helped me to transition from the strict religious kind of box that I was in to really open up and explore things in a different way. I mean, I'm very introverted, and it's helped me to kind of push beyond that too by creating my channel. And so I owe a lot to tarot just because of, just being there as a medium for me to grow. So thanks for that comment.
Yeah, can I say this too, William? One thing that I've noticed, because I also came up in a very Christian household, and there is a lot of tarot and it runs through the Bible and astrology. And so one thing I make sure that I don't do is forget any of it. If I intuitively felt led to bring up a story from the Bible when I'm in a reading, I intuitively feel like that's what my client needs right now. So it's like, take all of that background of where you came from. That's what's needed right now today and in those readings. So don't think that you can't bring up the Bible or bring up some kind of Christian thing simply because you're reading tarot right now. If you really break down the cards, there's a lot of Christian symbolism in each one of those tarot cards.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely agree with that. I mean, there's I talked in a video I did not too long ago. I talked about Adam and Eve. I talked about the devil card and the Hierophant and kind of, my perspective on that. But, I don't take away from that religious background. And, there's a lot that comes out just intuitively within me from that. And I incorporate it in there. And, I'm always like very open and free to even religious people. I'm like, you do what you want to do. If you like Christianity and that's your thing, then all of that is beautiful too. And that helps you. And so I don't have anything against that. I just kind of feel like when it shifted towards, me, I'm the one that's wrong, and, Christianity, the one that is the one that's right. And so I have to kind of mold myself into that whole platform. But you know, I'm kind of fresh from that, so I kind of have a little bit of a, I guess, a little bit of a resistance to kind of the Hierophant card and that whole perspective, just because I'm doing a lot of shadow work with that. But as I grow, I do find that that does come out a little bit more.
Can I say something in response to the whole Christian thing? This might be slightly veering off topic a little bit, but I think it's another interesting thing I observe in this like spiritual and tarot community when it comes to prejudice. I see there's a lot of like ill feelings towards Christianity and stuff like that. And almost like an opposition, like you can't be like Black and woke and be like Christian at the same time, or I don't know, have any sort of respect for Christianity or people of religious backgrounds. And like, I don't know, I think sometimes we forget that like the people in the Bible were people of color. Like I see Jesus as a Black man with locks. I'm sorry, that's just how I see him. You know, that's how I know a lot of people who I grew up with see him, you know. I see, you know, there's the whole connection of, you know, the Holy Family and spending time in Africa. And even there's like a lot of Christian saints that don't get enough recognition, like St. Augustine, like the whole like church was like built on him. He was an African saint, you know? So, and even when it comes to like my perspective of Christianity and Catholicism, like I know in the West Indies and in Bermuda, there's the church is kind of, it is sustained by people of color. When I go into the church, I see so many people of color there. They're the ones that like make up the church community. You know what I'm saying? So like when I look at the Hierophant, like it don't mean nothing to me. It doesn't bother me at all because he has no bearing on me. You know what I mean? Like that's not my, I don't know how to describe it, but like the Pope is like very insignificant to me. Like my experience of Christianity and church, the positive experience all come from the interactions and what I've learned from my fellow people of color in the church and what they bring to it, which is a lot more like primal, ritualistic, instinctual. They, you know, as Wanica said, sort of like this divination practices. This is a lot more, you see these aspects of Christianity being practiced a lot more among people of color. So I have no problem reconciling the two. And I just find it interesting because I definitely feel like in this community or spiritual communities, it can be very, I don't know, like Christianity is kind of just like got a bad taste in people's mouth.
I think,
sorry.
I think people have different experiences with Christianity. They have different things that they've been through with it. Christianity is broad. And, you know, my background it was a very strong religion that I came from. And it very much had a huge impact on me. So it's not like I think it's bad. It's just that my experience with it, I kind of have compartmentalized it for a little while. I'm trying to grow in a different way. I have nothing like, you know, where I would say anything that would, you know, put it down or anything like that. I mean, I've done videos talking about my thoughts on it. And I've always said, you know, I could be wrong. And that, you know, I have a lot of love for anyone that has different thoughts. And that's a whole part of it. I mean, I always felt like in religion, it was a little bit intolerant. And I felt like I didn't want to be that way. So I thought, well, if someone else is religious, I don't want to do that thing that was done to me to them. So I just sort of, I don't know, that's just my perspective on it. It's just a different experience from what I think a lot of people have.
I'm sorry. I think that's the key there is that some of us are sort of, particularly queer people, and there's a lot of queer people in this tarot sphere kind of recovering from what Christianity did to us as children, you know. So like I can speak of my own bias that I sort of get nervous when the topic comes up because I think, oh, are you going to hate me because I'm a gay person? So it's a dance that we have to do in this world around that. And I definitely will say things I regret later on, forgetting that I can't paint all Christians with one brush just because the ones that I grew up with really hurt me. You know what I mean? It's a long journey. So. from that point of view.
And I think there's like a movement within the New Age and alternative spirituality community to kind of adopt and critique some of that vocabulary. I can see like words of Christ consciousness being used among the New Age, and so there's ways of like engaging it from a particular perspective. I just wanted to follow up on David Davis here in terms of like your engagement from I believe like Hoodoo is it that you use to inform your reading, and then I'll turn it over to Regina afterwards, and Rashunda, who I know lives in Sweden and may want to bring in an international perspective. Oh,
I live in Switzerland. It's
Switzerland.
south. It happens all the time.
I'm sorry,
it happens all the time. Don't worry. But Sweden and Switzerland, they're two different countries.
I'm sorry, that was my bad. I knew it was one that began with an S. Okay, look, I'm tired.
I think
I could put in
Manu,
Sudan, huh?
Manuela is in Sweden.
Yeah.
Oh, see, you know.
Oh,
okay.
Manuela. Okay, I'm a guy.
Hi, Manu.
Hi.
Right, Manuela's in Sweden. See?
so just
Okay.
wanted to start with David, and then we can go around. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So can everybody hear me? I don't know
Yes.
audio. Okay. So, you know, coming from like a Hoodoo perspective, which is a culture that was quite literally birthed from the fight against oppression. That's kind of like the foundation of it. It's impossible, in my opinion, to divine from that mindset, from that sort of from within that cultural framework, without taking racism and privilege and class and stuff into account. And I tend to not take readers seriously who don't take those things into account, because it's literally impossible to me to do that. There is you know, and just I guess to be even more specific, Hoodoo it's Black culture, it's Black history, Black American culture and history specifically. And so when you and it's also, I guess, piggybacking off of the conversation that was just being had, it's heavily syncretized with like Protestant Christian imagery and symbolism. And so I sometimes will also find myself, I know Wanica left, but quoting scripture in readings, not to proselytize or for the dogma, but because it's a symbol, right? The story of Moses, no matter what you believe, it's a symbol. That entire story is a symbol. The story of Christ, and you even brought it up, John, about the whole idea of like Christ consciousness and how these people, they're archetypes, whether you believe they exist or not, whatever, but they're archetypes that can be sort of infused into the message. And yes, it's culturally specific and not everyone might identify with that specific symbol, but I studied English literature in college. So the ability to take symbols and, I hate the word universal, but for lack of a much better term, to make them universal and to analyze them in a way that everyone can sort of relate to, that's sort of something that I was taught separate from my spiritual and divination practice. I don't know if I answered the question, or if it was a question, I was kind of just talking.
I just wanted to follow up on the conversation and thanking everyone for just the insight. What I pulled from that for myself was about acknowledgement and specificity. And so where I resonate with that for myself in my own practice is there have been, you know, well-meaning, very good readers, but like you were suggesting and stating earlier, Queen, I said about if you've done your work, if you've researched someone, then you know from what background they're coming from and what kind of approach they may have to this work. Even if it's very, you know, open and your spirituality doesn't come into play when it comes to reading the cards, but that this is this person's background, like David was talking about. And it may not necessarily come up, but I don't think it's any different from myself as a human being living in this culture, being Black. yes, I'm a human being, but I have a different experience and lens of life that I look at the world through. And so I'm going to also then interpret that world through this lens. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that and to be specific about that being a part of, you know, my own practice personally, but that also maybe the lens that you receive the readings from as well. And so just acknowledgement of that specificity is important, I believe. And even going back to what David said about hoodoo and acknowledging that it comes from Black culture in the US, and the importance of understanding that if you go to him for a reading, you come to me for a reading. You know, I'm very forward with it on my website because my own personal experience has been, I denied that aspect in this work for so long because I had a lot of teachers, or not a lot, a few, tell me, you know, that doesn't matter. It, you know, the cards and this work transcends race, transcends color. But yet, you know, when they were sitting with me and channeling and seeing my spirits, you know, they just would see people out in the fields, you know, picking cotton, or, you know, they would see somebody in the kitchen making pancakes, singing a song. And I'm not kidding about this. So that stuff comes out because of people's own personal experience with their own culture and what they've been exposed to. So I appreciate the very humanistic and universality of this work, but that it does exist within a culture, and cultures where people learn it from. And I think that's the beauty also, that we all express it differently so that whomever's looking for us can find that too, what they're looking for. So there's multiplicity of variations of how we express through this work. Thank you.
Can we like acknowledge too the importance of knowing how to be a client too? For those of us, I don't do professional readings, but for those who do professional readings for others, for clients, can we acknowledge that we, you know, the people that are doing the professional reading, you need to like maybe be a client too, at least once. Go and seek out a reading, and that way it takes you to get another perspective too. If all you've ever done is do professional readings and you've never actually been a client, you need to put yourself in their shoes too. And how better way to do that than to go put your money where your mouth is and get a reading from someone. So I think that we need to acknowledge the importance of that too. That was just my 2 cents on that.
Rashunda?
Hi.
Hi, Rash.
Hi there.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Just wanted to ask about your own specific practice, and feel free to engage any of the questions that have been raised.
Honestly, I can't. There were so many questions I can't remember. I am so sorry. Which one would you? Which one is the one you would like for me to answer? Maybe that's the easiest.
I'm curious also in terms of how you've seen alternative spirituality become more mainstream. Are there any kinds of concerns that you might have? Is there like an opportunity that we should kind of embrace at this particular moment? Is there anything that concerns you about recent trends within the community?
Okay, I'm going to piss off a whole bunch of folks. It's hard for me to talk about alternative spirituality because I've never thought of my spirituality as being an alternative. It's mine. So for me to say alternative spirituality, I don't even know how to frame that.
Not from traditional religion. So that's, just.
What's traditional religion? That's what I'm not trying to be difficult. It's just that, you know, let me just say my background, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I went to church, but David, I kind of have a hoodoo type influence. So I don't even really know, there was so much of a mixture of things going on where I was raised. I don't even know anymore what traditional is.
That's fair.
So that's where I'm really even having a hard time answering that question with the way it's being phrased.
So, For me, as somebody who's from the Philippines, our practice of Catholicism is through folk Catholicism as well, where we have Christ figures along with Buddhist figures, along with animism as part of our background. So for me, I guess like when it comes to your a practice of whether it is tarot or astrology, things that have been associated as part of the New Age, I think over the past couple of years, there's a mainstreaming of it, whether through more media coverage from traditional media, which I would define as what, New York Times, Washington Post, or also through apps.
Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah, so it's just that. Yeah.
I think the first thing, and I spoke out about this a couple of weeks ago, was about the ageism that I see in spirituality, tarot, and everything, because everything now is so Instagram, social media focused. And it is very, nothing wrong with millennials, young folks, but it is very much centered towards young people. Mark Horn shocked me when I saw him in New York Times, because 9 times out of 10, if you read an article in Cosmopolitan, Allure, Glamour, these mass market publications or whatever, and they do interview someone that's an astrologer or a tarot reader or whatever, maybe they're 35 years old. Maybe. 9 times out of 10, they're 30 years old or something like that. Again, nothing wrong with it, but I'm more worried about that, and the fact that you have all ages. And I think if you, in terms of alternative religion or whatever, and again, what you're seeing on social media, you would think that your experts are 25. And I think that worries me. You have people who have never heard of not just Sheilaa Hite, but they've never heard of Rachel Pollack. They've never heard of Mary Greer. They've never heard of any of these people. They've never seen Jambalaya by Louisa Tesh. They wouldn't even know what that book looked like if you hit them on the back of their heads with it. And so I think what's happening is there's there's nothing wrong with youth and youth culture, but spirituality is an Instagram. It's not social media. And I think we really need to start, I hate saying calling out, but it's getting twisted. So what you see on Instagram, what you see on YouTube, what you see, whatever, that's great, but realize there's a whole history, a whole background that's been going on for decades before people even knew what Instagram was. And that's what worries me, especially when you introduce a tarot practitioner or someone that's spiritual, and then you immediately say how many followers they have. I got issues with that. So that's what I sort of, I'm having issues with that particular thing.
I can see David.
Can I add on to that? I just want to follow up with that. Thank you, Rashunda, for saying that, because yeah, I don't have that many followers, and I've been on YouTube probably 6 years now, but I didn't get out there for that. And I know sometimes, I didn't really understand this whole social media until I started really getting more engaged in it. I'm 46, so I have no problems with my age, but I do notice the difference in how I engage versus somebody else who may have grown up on this stuff. I didn't grow up on this stuff. And
But another thing I want to bring up is also in terms of looks. And again, I'm gonna piss off a whole bunch of folks by saying this, and this goes also with Instagram. I saw, now Grant, I've been invited to conferences and I do participate, but I have seen a particular look that is more acceptable on Instagram of, you got to have the long hair, you have to have, the right skin color, whatever. And again, we're all different skin colors or whatever, but there is a particular look that people gravitate towards. And so Queen Osset, when you were asking, why isn't, people people like Sheilaa Hite or these other folks that are popular, folks are going for looks too. And I think, I mean, it's almost as if you have a particular look, you can get on social media and say anything and everything and people will believe you just because you have a particular look. And I think that needs to be addressed too.
I agree. Ageism. Someone had mentioned that. Your video on ageism spoke volumes. You know, there are those of us, and you're right, there's a certain, it's like who is imparting the knowledge to the collective. These are people, as far as I'm concerned, still have baby teeth. You know, like what life experience do you really have? I'll be 60 in a few months.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my life,
you know, your
like,
life experience is, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but your life experience is golden. And I think that should be respected, Queen. I really, really do.
And it's not, right? So I had to use this mechanism called social media to share my voice. But one of the things I refuse to do, and you do it as well, and Regina, you do it as well, is to change and mold. I am what I am, how I am. And I could stand still, and there are many who will never catch up to me.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't matter, you know, this is where we talk about hierarchy. It's like the people, again, your money and what you say, you put those people in those positions. You know, Mary Kay Greer, Sheilaa Hite, Rachel Pollack, they formed the foundation of me learning tarot. I'm one of the old school people. I was certified by an organization that's defunct. I had to be certified as a reader. And nowadays, you know, it's like poo-poo, like you don't have to be certified, you know? And I work in retail and they come into the shop, they buy a deck, and by the end of the weekend, they're on YouTube doing readings. Like, what are you doing? Right? And again, sure, I talked about this yesterday, so I was gonna say, sure, trust your intuition. But do you even know what that is? Is that your intuition or is that your ego? Right? Think about it.
Yeah.
Okay? Because, you know, in order to be an astrophysicist, you have to be able to learn that 1 + 1 = 2. I don't care what you say, right? There is a basis. There is, and, you know, you have to think about this. There is like a foundation, I believe, that should be honored no matter what. David, Hoodoo, me, Ifa, Wicca, you have these foundations, these roots in place. And as the years progress, people want to disregard all of those things that got you to this place. If you look back on it, those people who practiced, who did whatever back in the day, if they conducted themselves how we are conducting ourselves now, we would have nothing to hold on to. We wouldn't have any roots to hold on to. You know, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, well, what do we have now? You know, the world has always been chaotic, always been filled with problems. People have been going for divination and reading since time immemorial. This is not new. Using the tarot is just another method, right? Why do people go for divination? Why? Right? To get a better understanding of how to navigate the world that they live in. That's why they go for divination. But there are those of us who have been around, like we've been here. We are the oak trees, providing shade and rootedness. And many of y'all just want to bypass us. You're not interested. You know, Larissa, you mentioned the publishers going out. The publishers, even they have a certain demographic that they will, what is that word? Cater to, so to speak, want to cultivate, right? They're not interested in what needs to be said, really. You know what I mean? If that makes any sense. And again, it goes, you know, it's like we're back in this vicious cycle. Who is funding the wheel? Who is making that wheel go around and around and around? Think about it.
Yeah. And so that's why Morgan, I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to add that I think it's this is why it's important for people in the tarot community to understand that they don't need to be a professional reader. And I think that sometimes it's easy for people to assume, especially if they're new at this, they pick up a deck and they assume that the path or track that they're supposed to be on is to read for other people. And tarot is broader than that. And there are many ways to engage with it. So I think that we need to remind people that you don't have to read for people. You can read for yourself. You can engage with tarot as a contemplative or spiritual practice. There are levels to that to explore. There are levels to determining which type of decks that you'll read with, what kind of system that you'll use. There's group work that you can engage in so that there's some kind of community accountability. But I definitely think that is, that what you say is correct, that there is ageism, that there is sometimes a minimization of the life experience. And for myself, a lot of what I bring to tarot is from my life experience. I mean, I'm almost 40. So, there's a lot of life that I lived before I even came to tarot. Mm-hmm. And so, so the books are helpful, but you also have to bring a certain level of good judgment, sense, experience to kind of balance out whatever intuitive messages you're getting from the tarot as well. So I just wanted to add that piece. Thank you.
It's capitalism, the equation of skill with money, and that's not the truth. You don't have to make money doing something to be considered good at it. And making money at it doesn't mean you are.
Right.
I'm just mindful that a couple of folks haven't spoken yet.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I just ask Manuela to go first?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Hi. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's such an honor to be here on this panel. So yeah. I'm happy to ask any question you might have.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I guess, you're not from the US, and I wonder whether some of these debates, how do they play out wherever you are? What kinds of clients do you have, and what are they expecting?
Yeah. I do create content on YouTube under the name Place of Stillness, and I do offer readings, paid readings, but still I'm not making my everyday living from providing tarot readings, and most of the readings that I've done so far, they have been guinea pig readings that I've given for feedback. So I have not really been, taking money for readings, to be quite honest, even though there's an option to purchase a reading with me. And the people who I've been reading for are my subscribers. Perhaps they won a reading in a giveaway, or I announced that I was doing guinea pig readings for feedback, and people approached me to get their reading. And I have not had any clients who asked me any questions on that political spectrum of life. All the questions that I've worked with were more personal questions concerning self-development, and I do use a rather coaching style in my readings, and also include kind of creative techniques. So first I would let the cards speak, and then after a while I would offer the client the option to exchange cards, or to bring new cards into the reading to complete the picture to what they would like to see in their life. So it's I will include the client, so they will be able to take command over the next steps in their lives. So that's basically what I'm doing. And like Black Lives Matter and the murder of George Floyd, I followed these events mainly through, of course, usual media and also the tarot community. I do not have a tarot community where I live. So my tarot community it's you. And many of you are based in the US and some are based in other parts of Europe as well, or other parts of the world. So I'm kind of part of the dialogue, and yeah, on my channel I've sometimes spoken with on my kind of aspirations for how I would be able to grow my own awareness. And I guess what I'm doing on my channel in general is kind of speaking to people and trying to being open and curious about anyone who's commenting, and also trying to approach people with different backgrounds and life experiences. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Manuela. So, two people haven't spoken yet. James and Abundant Life Tarot. So I just I'm looking at the time, and we're at the 2-hour mark. So James, did you want to speak about any changes you might have had in your practice over the past couple of months?
Oh, hi everyone. Thanks, John. I've really just enjoyed being an active listener today and hearing so much from all of you. I'm not sure how much I have to offer. I guess as far as my practice changing over the last few months, the offerings that I give, and then how that, I guess, is reflective of the times that we're in, and the movements that we're experiencing, and just trying to be aware and respond in a way that feels authentic and helpful in some regard. I'm not sure that my offerings they've kind of remained relatively consistent. Not too much. I mean, I offer my readings and I teach some workshops and classes locally. And so I guess on a local level, I do actually have a bit of an in-person tarot community in my area, which I feel fortunate for. I know many people are in areas of the world that isn't something that's accessible to them. So I did want to, I guess I thought that the discussion surrounding ageism was super interesting. And I was just learning so much listening to those perspectives. Of course, I have much less life experience than some others. So being here and then tuning into some of your channels, especially to see how your experiences and your practice are all informed by your life experience, it's been awesome. But yeah, I would say, I guess my practice has been relatively consistent. I tried to do my part on a local level too. And for people in my area who maybe aren't as familiar with the online, for example, tarot community, who are more so just familiar with the local environment, and even just turning some people on to YouTube to hear other voices out there that aren't from the northeast of the US. And there are many tarot readers out there with global perspectives. So I value those a lot, and I hope I can help others to find them as well.
Well, thanks, James. Certainly a very colorful Instagram feed lately. I wanted to ask Abundant Life Tarot, feel free to engage any of the themes around ageism, hierarchies, gatekeeping and publishing. Feel free.
Okay, wow. It was amazing just to be able just to sit and listen to everyone. 2020 was a crazy year for all of us. And when I come to tarot, I come to it, yes, on the personal, person to person, I read professionally, and then also on the collective and what we all were experiencing. And I happened to be going through a death year in 2020. I mean, it was a low buy year, meaning I still procured decks, but as we went through those changes and as I saw people suffering, I realized that we were masking a lot of pain through consumerism. And I just really wanted to support the tarot reader, support the metaphysician in my content that I put out. I used to read collectively, do tarot readings for the collective. It just didn't feel right. But what felt right to me as we moved from 2020 to 2021 is to support the people who are supporting the Earthlings, the world. And yeah, there is definitely gatekeeping. I could go on in a whole nother video on about that, but I'm just called to have people look at where is the shadow in your life and what are we doing actively every day that could be masking something that we really need to be looking at. I know for me, it was buying decks and collecting decks. So I had to go through a whole process of working through that. And it's amazing to see people start to come to that realization. It also hurts my heart when I see collectors or people, tarot readers, getting all of, a buzz over decks. And I'm like, oh, can't we get back to learning about how to work with these decks? Can't we get back to learning on how to support one another as we are reading for the collective? So I don't have too much to add. I mean, I have a lot to add, but
one favorite deck. Do you have one favorite deck? Just one recent favorite.
Oh my God. One recent favorite deck. Yes, the Herb Crafter's Tarot. It's this slow love affair that I have with this deck. I've had it for since it came out, I guess, I don't know if it was independent or not. And I didn't really use it when I was in the States. Many of you know I relocated from the United States at the end of 2020 to the Dominican Republic because I needed to decompress, needed to get my life together. And the Herb Crafter's Tarot recently came to me again. It was shipped, took 3 months to get here, customs issues. We won't go there. But it's been just phenomenal. I'm not even an herb kind of person or an essence kind of person really, but it's rocking my world. So yes, right now a recent favorite is the Herb Crafter's Tarot.
Thank you so much. I know David and Kim want to share something. David?
Yeah, I'm gonna make it quick. I have some notes so I don't go off on a tangent. Just commenting on the ageism conversation that was being had, I wholeheartedly agree. And as this probably isn't the popular millennial answer, but I feel like there's this odd push against any kind of hierarchy or any kind of authority figure. And I'm not advocating for authority figures in tarot. However, just in the spiritual sphere as a whole, traditionally speaking, there have been healthy expressions of hierarchy within different traditions. Speaking from the perspective of African traditional religions and spiritual systems, there are priests and initiates and this, that, and the other, and those, everyone is a part of a community. The titles and roles are not arbitrary. Everyone serves a purpose. And so for those things to be bypassed just because, I guess just to put it bluntly, no one wants to be told what to do or how to do something at any given point, at any point in time. So it's just I will, bless her heart, Beyonce, because of her, yes, there's this beautiful conversation being had about the Orishas, but now everyone is a child of Oshun and everyone is a priestess. And so it's you just wake up one day and it's this, I am Ifa so-and-so, or I'm conjurer this or hoodoo, and I'm but you're not. And that's okay, be a student. And you don't have to jump straight from the revelation that you're interested in this spiritual system, or in the case of tarot or astrology, this divination system. And then the next day you wake up and you're high this, grand that, blah, 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 blah. And so I just think, and that obviously goes into ageism because the traditions I'm speaking about, the perspective I'm coming from, typically the rank is associated with age. Yes, there are exceptions where very young people are authority figures. But those are exceptions to the rule. It's usually the older you are, what I'm trying to say. And so it's a very interesting thing that I see, and it's not a very popular opinion I found in conversations I've had with, I'm 24 years old, so people in my age range, age group, where I'm what do you have against a hierarchy just in the spiritual world? And not all of the spiritual world, but in the individual pockets that exist, what do you have against that? And it all tends to boil down to people just not liking to be told what to do. And then the conversation about religion versus spirituality. And I know there's a lot of trauma around the word religion, but there is nothing inherently wrong with religion. So if you identify as spiritual, fine, but I don't think it's healthy to let one religion or one group of religions monopolize the word religion or the word God. God is a title, not a name. And so it can be applied to different things. So that was just my thing. The ageism conversation sparked the sort of conversations surrounding hierarchies and then generational hierarchies. And yes, there are some unhealthy expressions of that, but personally being someone who grew up, my dad is an ordained minister, grandmother an apostle, uncles, deacons, this, that, blah, blah, blah. I grew up with these sort of levels of initiation into different positions of authority in a community. And so it wasn't perfect. Yes, like there, narcissism runs in my family.
Everywhere.
It's like people abuse power every now and again, but for the most part, my experiences were healthy. So I don't have this trauma associated with having someone above me sort of being the gate, because gatekeepers, sometimes it's a safety thing. You don't necessarily want to go out calling yourself priest of this, or I'm the master of this, and then you invite something in and you don't have the skills to get rid of it. So it's that's kind of veering away from tarot and astrology a little bit, but I feel like it does apply because tarot and astrology obviously fall into like the spiritual sphere, depending on who you ask.
Yeah, can I just jump in? Sorry, I know I'm jumping the queue, just to like totally co-sign what you're saying. And I think that's the point I was trying to make around Christianity, in that I see it more as people's issue with Christianity or religion, organized religion, is just people's opposition to hierarchy, to any sort of gatekeeping. We want to have like everything free and everything open. And I'm totally with you 100%, David. Like I have a hard time hanging out with people my age. Most of my friends are like seriously close friends of mine are like 2 and 3 and 4 generations older than me. I'm mourning the loss of my auntie right now, who died. She was 81. She was 81 years young. The woman was amazing. And let me tell you, she used to go to church every Sunday wearing an ankh around her neck. She had no problem dealing with crystals. She knew all of her astrology placements. Like she was like an OG, like she, you know what I mean? She made religion work for her. It was not that she was subservient to any sort of pope or hierophant or something like that. And so, yeah, but these are, yeah, I also have a hard time with just sort of like the aversion to hierarchy and like just the millennial way of wanting, like, I don't know, just the popularization of making spirituality fashionable, and people always looking to these trendy whatever musicians and stuff like that, as opposed to really, I don't know, being ready to dig deep and really respect like the elders. Okay, sorry, I'm a host now.
Yeah, that's okay. I think there's a new beat in the magazines like Glamour, Cosmo, Rolling Stone to cover TikTok astrology and the feuds that are going on there, and how technology, and this is of course obviously amplifying just a certain set of voices. And yeah, I can see this trend as bringing visibility, but also compromising a lot of what the community might be standing for. At the same time, within the astrology community, I know some organizations that gather queer astrologers, female astrologers, to talk about some very urgent crises going on. So there's one conference next week, Radiant Astrology, that sheds light on some very critical issues. Kim, did you want to go next before we close?
Okay, I was gonna be like, I want to chime in on ageism because I'm probably the baby of the group, but I just found out that I'm not. So, but I just appreciate everything that you guys have said so far. I think I definitely agree that just to just to respond first to the point about people are really quick to like adopt spiritual concepts. I think it's mostly because it's trendy or it's bandwagoning or it's just they want like a cool identity tag attached to them. It's less about the practice or developing the skill or actually getting to know what the practice is and what the history and the cultural background is, etc. So I think it's just this sort of it's spiritual consumerism, I guess. Like they're consuming the ideas without really engaging the idea. But what I wanted to say about ageism is I actually have the opposite struggle when it comes to ageism. I always have to kind of fight a little harder for people to take me seriously just because I look very young and I definitely don't have that stereotypical look of a spiritual authority. And it's not that I want to be seen or treated as a spiritual authority. I just want to be able to express what I want to say without having to deal with projections that people put on me because, you know, on top of looking very young, I'm also Asian and female and also have this kawaii thing going on. So it's just like, I always have to overcome that and have to overcome all the stereotypes. But I think like when it comes to social media, there's definitely like a lot of problematic sort of like there's this image where you have to adhere to this image in order to be consumable almost. And it's less about who you are and what your message is. And I think can definitely be frustrating because even though I'm young, I definitely don't fit in that image or what's consumable in the spiritual community and just like the social media. But I just want to say like, I feel very blessed that to have social media, even though it's a constant struggle against algorithm. And there's also like power structures and some gatekeeping in social media. But I think I still feel very blessed because I feel like if I were to pursue the traditional route of say getting published or trying to, you know, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now and creating what I'm creating without social media. I think it's just like a blessing, even though it definitely has its problems. Yeah, I think that's mostly what I want to say. But yeah, I think I just wanted to like, before we all go, I just want to say like, even though there's a lot of struggles and there's a lot of problems, even in social media, I think there's just definitely a complete lack of respect for a lot of the practices out there and just anything that's not within that historical image of what's acceptable or consumable or visible by the algorithm. It's kind of just discarded and it's not really paid attention to. But I think despite that, the way I see this is that the more I can succeed as a PLC on Instagram, despite all those challenges, it's going to be easier for the PLCs after me to succeed. Because without all the people that come before me, without all those tarot books, for example, I'm Asian. So without seeing, say, Venable Wen being a published author and her being active on social media, I probably wouldn't feel as encouraged to pursue what I want to pursue. So yeah, I just want to mention that.
Well, thank you so much, Kim. So I can see it's now 4:15. I promised Tom to get this done by 4:15. Did you want to close, Tom and Queen Aset?
I'll put a list of a bunch of books by different authors. That's gonna be my contribution, okay? But one of the things I want to say that in spite of, you know, the shenanigans around the world, I'm still hopeful. Like I'm still full of joy and happiness. And ageism, someone had posted, it does work both ways, right? So the youth, they bring a lot of excitement and passion and everything, but just don't forget us old folks who paved the way. You know what I mean? Like we're still here, right? You know what I mean? Like we've walked that path, and sometimes we can tell you, you don't want to make a left down that rocky road because you're going to end up in the sewer or something, right? So it works both ways, right? Make your life a little bit easier. Now, as I said before, you know, we know self-care is paramount. The fact that you are here and you're engaging, you're doing something, right? And I always said this when I started my YouTube channel, that I was going to build a table for everyone. Everyone is invited. Everyone. I'm not concerned about your age, your race, your ethnicity, your spiritual background, anything, your sex, nothing, none of that matters to me. All that matters to me is that you want to bring some love and improvement to the world. That's it. You know what I mean? And I'm even open to a bit of controversy because you know how how I do on my channel, right? You know, I poke the bear, because if we never have a conversation, we'll never grow. We'll never get a different perspective of things. So we need to do that, right? So before I leave, I want you guys, Mecca Woods astrology book.
Becca Woods?
Yeah, Mecca.
Mecca.
Yes.
Mecca.
Yes. Okay. Astrology for Happiness and Success, Mecca Woods. And for those of you who like coloring, she also has coloring books for the signs. See? You know, because I'm going to find anything. Tom introduced me to this.
Fire. Yeah.
I'm sorry, darling?
Stars on Fire, her podcast. Mecca and Janelle, yeah.
Yeah, right. And here's another book.
Yes, that book's great. That one I have read.
Okay. You know, you want to read different astrology books. Oh, and Tiana. Now, you know, this is a young lady. I think I'm twice her age, and I've learned so much from her. So, you know, let's squash that. And Tiana and I, we don't always see eye to eye. There's some things that I totally disagree on that she posts, but she causes me to think. And that's what I mean about engaging the youth. Don't trivialize stuff. You know what I mean? Like, come to me with some stuff that I can think about, that I can chew on. Don't come to me with the idea like, oh, I'm so young and I'm entitled to do this. That's what we have a problem. Okay? I'm going to post these old school Black astrology books, right? Thelma Balfour, way back in the day for many of us. Black sun signs, right? You see, this is the stuff that occupies my shelf as well. And for those of us who say, like, you know, you're doing readings for the collective, you're doing readings for your clientele, if you're on the phone, it'd be kind of nice to get some, you know, we talk about learning about other cultures and all of that. Well, don't you think you should be reading books like this too, written by authors of different cultures, different backgrounds as well, so you can get a different insight, different flavor, right? Okay. And, you know, of course, I mentioned Miss Hite. I have all of her books, tarot books. Excellent. This one. Okay. And she's supported and acknowledged and highly regarded by Mary Kay Greer and Rachel Pollack. It's just that you don't hear about her books in the tarot circle, which is unfortunate. She's up there.
She's also an incredibly talented artist. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
I said she's also an incredibly talented artist.
Yes, she is. You know what I mean? She is an incredible artist. So these are people, you know, to help expand your awareness. So, you know, when we talked earlier, I know, Larissa, about doing the work and don't come to us. You shouldn't have to go to people to give you the answers. And you know what I mean? Like when you're going through things, see, it works both ways, because sometimes I feel like, well, okay, maybe some people just don't know where to go. They don't know how to go about it. But you know, if you Google Black astrologers, you know how many people will come up? I'm just saying, right? I mean, it's unfortunate that we had to say Black astrologers to get that realm, right? Because if you type in astrologers, they're not there. And that's what I want to stop. A tarot reader is a tarot reader is a tarot reader. I shouldn't have to look for Black tarot readers. I shouldn't have to look for Black astrologers. And that's the part of patriarchy I think that's what we need to address, that. And why do we allow that to continue to exist? And like I said, think about who's driving the wheel of patriarchy. And I'm done.
Thank you, everybody. I don't have a lot to say. I know this is a long call, but I think the whole time we've had between 70 and 150 people watching and chatting in the chat. And I think that that's pretty great. And you know, I think it's nice to close with the idea of not being consumable. I think 2020 taught me to fuck being consumable. Like,
Yeah.
you know, fuck it. Who cares?
Yeah.
You know, let's stir the damn pot. And that's what
Yeah.
we do. So I'm happy to host again next time, but if anyone wants to take the ball next time, you know, you can reach out to us. There's been a request in the chat that we try to get everyone's Instagram and our YouTube channels. We'll try. It's a big group, so we'll do our best to get those in the comments. We put links to most of the books that Keyonce mentioned. I didn't get the last two.
Oh, which one?
The two smaller ones.
Oh, the sensual astrology books?
Yes, sensual astrology. So we'll Google those and put those in the description too, probably tomorrow.
Yeah.
But sensual astrology.
Mhm.
We talked about hierarchy and the idea of mentorship and ageism and youth. And I view everyone on this call as a mentor, and I hope that I serve as mentors to others as well. I think this idea of mentorship rather than hierarchy is really key. And I learn so much every time we have one of these and every time I watch your all videos. And I'm really honored to be, you know, a small piece of the puzzle that's having this conversation. So, so that's it. 2.5 hours of really fascinating stuff, and people stuck with it. And so thank you all so much for being open and here, and, you know, just fuck being consumable.
Yeah. Keyonce.
Yes, dear.
Can I ask something of you before we go?
Sure.
Would you pull a card from the one of the Skin Deep and give us a question to leave off with, please?
Oh, you want one of those?
I want one of those. Look, I got the Truth deck. It's called the Dark Edition. And they got some powerful words like dark. And I'm going to use this deck to answer your question.
Okay, give me a second. Let's see what I got here. Oh, boy.
I don't know. This must be the hierarchy that I've put on her lately, is that she always leaves her videos with this question from one of those decks. I think that's powerful. Her new shtick.
Yes, it is. So what she's talking about is these decks, the and.
Yes.
For real conversation, real questions. And they have them based on different things. So we're all strangers here, yeah? Or we're going to be friends? All depends. And I always ask that question, like, when do we become friends? When do we get to that part?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the level of trust. And we have a false belief that we have to agree on everything to be friends. No, we're not. What's the one surprising thing you think we have in common?
So is this a question we're to meditate on, or are we supposed to talk about it?
Oh,
right
no. Lennan disappeared? Oh, she's there. Oh, you're there. That's you, Lennan. You wanted me to pull. I pulled a card, right? So you pulling a card for the collective, right?
Yes, so.
Let's see how 12 people, 12 individuals, let's see what makes us similar.
You know what card I pulled?
What?
Offensive.
I love it.
Yeah.
Offensive. Are we offending people by this hierarchy? Are we too worried about that? Right?
Too worried about offending people.
Yeah. And you said, what's the most surprising thing we have in common? Is that we're worried about that.
Yeah.
What did we say before I asked you to pull this? Fuck consumerism.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
Don't worry about the offensiveness. You do you. You do you. And if it's coming from the heart, I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
All right.
everybody. I know folks need to go, and I do too.
Yes.
Thank you for just have a great week and keep in touch and keep up the good conversation.
Bye.
Bye.
Love everyone. Well, no, I don't, but yeah, I do.